I would just encourage salespeople who want to be more effective to look into and follow their passions about how they want to get to know themselves better.
Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast Live in partnership with HubSpot and recorded at the Leadership Summit in Chicago. On today's episode, we have Matthew Bellows. He is the CEO of Yesware. And on today's show, we take a slight tangent, and we take multiple tangents within the conversation as well, but there's tons of value in this one. We're looking at why being authentic, being genuine, being real to customers and everyone else that you deal with just in life in general leads to more business closed and just better relationships overall. You can find out more about Matthew over at yesware.com. We'll link to that and everything else that we talk about, including the meditation apps and all that good stuff in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with all that said, let's jump in to today's show. Matthew, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you, Will. Good to be here.
I'm glad to have you on. Yeah. And I'm going to just mention this because you just spent 15, 20 minutes with me before we click record, giving me a ton of value. So I appreciate that. I always shout this out to the audience because, it just hopefully sums you up and gives a bit of context to the audience as well, that you're one of those people who will help out. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about essentially being yourself, the value of that in sales. I think this is underestimated. I think it's under-pushed by sales management. And I think this is the tool to kind of clean up in the world and the cliche of getting someone to know, like, and trust you before they buy from you. So is there a process to do this even, of getting that authentic self across, that genuine self across, whether it's email, phone call, whatever it is? Is there a process we can put in place to make this happen?
I think it starts actually before the channels with which you communicate. It starts with actually getting to know yourself and doing some amount of introspection about what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your motivation is, how you're showing up in the world, and learning from that and then working on it. It's actually a process that people go through, and they take any number of disciplines to dig into, but in order to be authentic and genuine, you actually have to get to know where you are showing up and where you're not.
How do we do that then? So forget all the rest of it for a second.
Forget the technology.
This is the crux of it.
This is the crux.
And I know in the world of entrepreneurship, in business in general, at a high level, people like Gary Vaynerchuk, they're constantly banging on about self-awareness. And I think this trickles down eventually over time. But what you're describing is being self-aware of your why, even deeper than your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Is there, again, a process? We like step-by-step processes on the show.
Yep.
Is there a process to uncover some of this?
There are many, actually. And a friend of mine, a VP of sales friend of mine, once said, sales is basically, I get paid to talk to people all day. So in a profession like ours, where we're basically forming interpersonal relationships as we go, the way you show up is crucial to your eventual success. And the process for finding out how you're showing up is any number of approaches. But I personally do sitting meditation, and I practice sitting meditation as a way of discovering how my mind works and how I'm affecting other people. But there are lots of there's yoga, there's martial arts, there's long distance running, there's therapy, there's a lot of different ways of figuring out who you are as a person. I would just encourage salespeople who want to be more effective to look into and follow their passions about how they want to get to know themselves better, and that tends to help them succeed better.
So we're taking a turn here that I wasn't expecting to, and meditation is something that comes up surprisingly frequently on the show.
Is that right? Okay.
So I got into meditation through the Headspace app and the book. I read the book. It took away all the woo-woo nonsense side of meditation. My background is in chemistry, which regular listeners will know. So I'm super into biofeedback and biohacking, all this good stuff. But when you mentioned sitting meditation, are there any books, resources? Is there any way you'd recommend of learning more about that? Because I linked them in the show notes as well.
One of the best books, and I've studied and practiced meditation now for about 25 years,
wow.
So I've read a lot of these books. One of the best ones that's out recently is called Turning Your Mind into an Ally by a American Tibetan teacher called Mipam Rinpoche, M-I-P-H-A-M. And in this book, he basically talks about how our minds, without training, are constantly undermining what we want to do. There's a conflict, right? And turning your mind into an ally not as simple as just like affirmation or whatever, but gets your mind and your body on the same team, gets them synchronized, and then suddenly like you can ride out into your life with a lot more power and effectiveness. So I would definitely recommend that book as a starting point.
Good stuff. I'll link to that in the show notes. And I know meditation for me gives me clarity on a lot of this stuff. It makes me double down on, I don't know who said this, I think it's a saying, probably since the Stoics, it's probably been something that's been talked about in the world of sales, business, entrepreneurship, in that I look at mistakes, I look at failures, I look at anything like that, and if I feel like I can bounce back within 12 months from it, then I put it to one side and I forget about it. But it's only when I meditate.
Within 12 months, is it?
If I can bounce back from it, if I can recover from it, if it's not going to impact me in 12 months' time, if for example, if I go crazy and kind of strangle someone here, clearly that's not going to, it's difficult to recover from that.
Got it.
Versus if I take the risk to do the podcast live, and it's a complete flop and failure, I can recover from that. And this is, within the world of sales as well. I would always have one whale deal in medical devices, one big theatre refurbishment every year that I wanted to attack and go at, but I knew that even if I didn't hit target that year, I'd recover the year after because it would come in then. For example. So and the reason I brought that up is I only have clarity on these moments when I sit there for 10 minutes and meditate. It's just I've got all this stuff bouncing around in my head all the time, and it's only when I go, all right, I'm gonna have 10 minutes to myself, just sit there, be quiet, and then I go, oh, I can recover from that in 12 months' time. It's going to be fine. And then it kind of gets, I don't know whether it's physically in your brain, I don't know what's going on, but it seems to be taken away from this frontal part and just put into the kind of nether regions to be brought up when appropriate. So I appreciate all that.
When you think about our life, you realize like we're constantly trying to distract ourselves from just spending time with ourselves. We're constantly on the phone, swiping away, or going out and doing stuff, or talking to people, or like reading magazines. The whole magazine industry is basically like a one big distraction industry, right? And even just blocking out 10 or 15 minutes a day helps put all of that in perspective, just like you're saying. So I'm totally on the same page, and I love that Headspace app. There's another one called 10% Happier, which is another small segment of meditation instruction, which are both great.
So how do we scale this up then from we've got a bit of space to ourselves. We know what perhaps is important to us at this point from having that space. How do we then distill what we're good or bad at? Because that's the next layer of the onion up.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it gets interesting. Like they call it meditation practice because it's practice for real life. You're not meditating to meditate. You're practicing your mind, getting to know yourself in order to be part of the world. And so you learn that in relation to other people. You go out and talk to people and you feel how it's going and you see where you're good or not. And this is one thing that sales is absolutely incredible for as a vehicle for personal development, because you're constantly reaching out and getting feedback from the world about how you're showing up.
How do we get that feedback though versus making 500 phone calls and being rejected a whole bunch of times and not knowing why, and showing up the next day and doing the same thing over and over and over?
Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So this is you, because sales is so difficult and there are so many challenges with connecting with people, like your approach to it gives you the feedback. In other words, your ability to communicate directly and clearly to someone on the phone, if you have a 30-second window and they pick up by mistake, gives you the feedback about how am I doing. And suddenly if you pay attention to where it's working and where it's not working, then you can learn about where you're strong and where you're weak. If you just dial for dollars all day, you're going to be a terrible salesperson. You're never going to improve, right? Sales is all about improving and learning from the feedback and keeping on going. And also dropping what just happened on the call the last time and going on fresh start to the next one.
So we'll come on to that in a second, perhaps, of dealing with or not feeling rejection and not dealing with it, just it not being a thing. So we'll come on to that in a second. But real practically here, for someone who's making cold calls, for someone who's emailing, for me, it was popping my head into hospital theatres, operating rooms, and kind of waving to the surgeon. How should we document this to get the feedback? Should we? It's easier for email or phone call because there's software that can help with some of this, perhaps. But should we have, whether it be a journal, like a sales journal? Should we have a spreadsheet, and should we be A/B testing some of this stuff? How's the best way to go about it?
So we should be documenting, like a scientist would with their experiments, a log of what we're doing and what we're trying and how it's working. And it could be in any form that you like. I mean, my company Yesware makes software that helps salespeople test email messaging and helps them understand what subject lines get better open rates and what templates get better response rates and things like that. So there's a lot of analytics out there available through software packages. But even if you don't have any of that stuff, like just keep a journal like this and say, I called these people, and at the end of the call, do a check and a little note, or an X and a little note. And in a week of doing cold calls, you'll have more data about how you're showing up in the world than you've ever had before in your life. And learn from that, and you'll get better. I guarantee it.
How important is this? Because we're having quite a high-level conversation here, which I love. I love these conversations because they spill out into just communicating better in sales, into communicating better with your friends, your family, and building better relationships there. Should we be doing this with our friends, family, relationships? Maybe not documenting every phone call we have, but should we have a focus on how we're showing up in front of them? And does that all tie back into sales?
I think it all ties together. Yeah. I think the whole idea that like I'm someone else at work than I am at home actually doesn't really stand up to analysis. And frankly, it's incredibly painful to have to go to work and put on your professional face and then take it off, and then you get into this whole like living for the weekend, it's hump day, I hate Mondays kind of mindset, which basically sucks 5 of the 7 days of your adulthood out. And
you're trading 5 days for 2, right?
And it's a terrible trade-off, right? It's much better to think about your life as a whole and think about using the opportunities that you have at work to grow as a human being, so that when you leave work, you can still keep going, you know what I mean? And take those into being genuine and trying to be honest with yourself about who you are and what you want to learn is basically, it works 24/7.
Let's get, again, practical with this, and then we'll come back to rejection and we'll wrap up the show with this. So, CEO, if we're selling to the C-suite, you can give us your kind of thoughts and opinions on this. How do you, I guess it'll be a gut feeling, then you'll process it, and then you'll like, either reply or not reply, or pick up the phone or not pick up the phone. When you get an email, for example, that is, hi, blah, 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 corporate message, when you personally
someone's trying to sell to me.
Yeah, and because this will translate to the C-suite and the audience that we have here. Perhaps they're not always selling to the C-suite, but they're in the decision-making conversations.
Sure, it's the same thing, I think, actually.
How do you feel when you get a super corporate email when you know the person is kind of using a template versus when someone reaches out to you and there's a bit of personality in there and they're mentioning perhaps the sports that you're into or the fact that you're essentially an entrepreneur, you've exited companies, you've done all this awesome stuff in the past?
I mean, I get so many emails a day, and I look down my list of Gmail and I select all, and then I uncheck the ones that look interesting, and I delete the rest.
So just from the title,
I don't even open like 80% of the email I get.
How can we get opened in your inbox then?
Because what you need to do basically is send me a personal email, like an email that resonates in the first subject line, the first sentence of the email that says, I know who you are as a person, and I'm a human being too. So all the generic email subject lines just turn into spam, right? Mm-hmm. And spam is the death knell of a salesperson. You're killing your reputation as a salesperson, and you're hurting the brand of your company. So really, the whole sales automation and sales acceleration thing has an enormous dark downside, because you do things too quickly, you can't do them well. So I would recommend, for real B2B sellers that are closing sizable deals, spend 15 or 30 seconds thinking about the person you're about to send this note to and engage with them at a personal human level, something that's genuine for you. Like, I always looked at the LinkedIn profile and I look at the bottom and I say, what are they really into? And I'll say, oh, this person's into volleyball. I don't know how to play volleyball, but I've played on the beach, and I can send them a note about, hey, I saw you're into volleyball. Blah. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be about the product. You don't have to jam your features into the beginning. Like, form a good human connection, and then the person will want to do business with you. And frankly, if they don't, that's fine too.
How important, and you just touched on something here which has been coming up over and over on the show recently, and that is reputation over the longer term.
Yeah.
As an individual B2B salesperson, how important is that now, and how important is that going to become with the knowledge that the email that I send to you that you put into the spam folder because it looks spammy means that I'm not able to email you anymore.
Yeah.
How important is that going to be over the longer term?
I think it's increasingly important. The days when the traveling salesman would walk up to your door and try to sell you, encyclopedias, and you'll never see that person again in your life, it didn't matter, right? Sales could be much smarmier and much more manipulative. But now, in a networked world where reputation and trust are at a premium, it's increasingly important that salespeople treasure their reputation and build it as honest, direct brokers. Like, what you're looking to do as a salesperson is not convince someone else to buy from you. You're looking to find the people that you want to work with. And if you find those people, then you can do business together and both create value. Both people get better off from working together. But you don't need to convince somebody to work together. You just need to find those people that want to work with you. And if you do that, then your reputation goes up.
And your value and the ability for other people to come on board with you over the long term goes up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing stuff. Well, we mentioned rejection. I want to wrap up with this, Matthew, and that is, I'm just going to ask you very openly, I don't want to put words in your mouth or lead you anywhere with this, and I think I'm going to get a really insightful answer. How do we deal with rejection? Simple as that. How do we process it? How do we deal with it? How should we?
Okay, 2 different things. In general, we deal with it in you can deal with it well, you can deal with it poorly. If you deal with it poorly, you tend to see 3 different styles. You see ignorance, you ignore it. Aggressiveness, you lash back out at the person. Or basically sort of like you try to schmooze the person into not feeling. It's like a passionate response to negative feedback or rejection. If you deal with it well, basically you're able to actually feel it in your body and then drop it and let it go. You can't just like push it away. That's push it away, you don't feel it, you don't get the data, you don't get the feedback, you don't learn from it. You have to feel it intellectually and emotionally, and it's hard, it's painful. That's one reason why this job is difficult. And then you have to be able to drop it. And dropping it, the simple techniques. If you're on the phone and somebody's really rude to you, they hang up on you after swearing at you for 5 minutes. Don't ever call me again, blah, blah, blah. Don't pick up the phone again. Stand up, walk around, go to the water cooler, get a drink of water, commiserate with a pal, then pick up the phone when you're fresh. And my first sales job was a door-to-door campaigner for the nuclear weapons freeze campaign. And I would knock on between 10 and 75 doors a night. And every door was a whole different universe, right? You're going into their house and showing up at dinner time, and you got to talk about stopping the nuclear weapons arms race. And I got the widest variety of responses from people, and I just learned through that process of like, okay, that door's closed, walk to the next door, and in that walk, feel it, drop it, and like start fresh again.
Amazing stuff. Well, Matthew, I've got one final question to ask everyone that comes on the show, so wrap up with this, and that is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
To help him become better at selling? I mean, as a kid, I did not think I wanted to be a salesperson. I thought like working at a company was like selling out to the man. So I think what I would tell him is basically like, it's actually not so bad. It's actually kind of cool. Like, and there's actually amazing people and great opportunities to learn and grow. So
amazing stuff. I did not expect that answer. That is the most unique out of everyone here at the Leadership Summit. So I appreciate that.
All right, good.
And with that, tell us a little bit about Yesware. We can find out more about you as well.
So Yesware is a company that my partner and I started about 6 years ago that makes software for salespeople. We basically make email, calendar, mobile phone, CRM, telephone work better for salespeople, saving them hours a day in data entry, and giving them insights about what's working and what's not in their sales process. Customers include, Twitter and Salesforce and Box and Forrester and lots of other big companies and small companies too. So I would just say, if you're interested in upping your sales game, go to yesware.com, try it for free, see if you like it and if it helps you.
Amazing stuff. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes to this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Matthew, I want to thank you for joining us.
And if anybody wants to talk about sales stuff, just send me an email. I'm Matthew, Matthew, @yesware.com. I'm happy to chat.
Amazing stuff. We'll expect some emails from Sales Nation
Looking forward to it.
And thanks again for joining us on the show.
Thank you.